Welcome back. This is part 4 in the Walnut and Maple Desk build series. In the last video, this is where I left off. I had just finished the uppercase assembly joinery, the main joinery from the sides to the tops and bottoms, and that was a whole lot of dovetails. In this video, I'm going to be moving on. So this is the point where I left off in the last video, and what I'm going to be working on in this one is adding in all of these internal pieces, the drawer dividers, and in the back I've got a channel that's going to be built in for cable management. So there's the back of the drawers, behind the drawers, as well as this lower stretcher that's going to run across. This upper one is already done and dovetailed in, but this one across the bottom has to be added in, and then all of the drawer supports and drawer sides. These two pieces are going to be sliding dovetails across the entire bottom and of course across the top here. But you can also see that there's two separate pieces in the front here. That's because the grain orientation on these pieces is going to be running front to back, and I want the grain on the front to match the grain on the sides and the grain across the top stretchers, which is long grain. So I'm going to cut the actual drawer dividers a little short and then make up two pieces with grain running up and down so that the grain will match across the front. Lumber selection for this step wasn't as big of a deal since all of these pieces are going to be internal components and aren't really going to be seen except for the one rail across the back. What was more important is laying out all of the joinery where it's going to go, and I'm starting that here with the layout for the back of the drawers. This will also form the cable channel in the back. Since these are going to be sliding dovetails on the sides, I'm marking out just a center line and then the depth that I want the dovetail to go to. I'll use that mark to determine the total length of the piece by setting one end against the mark and then transferring that mark from the other side. Once I have it marked, I take it over to the table saw and cut it to length. I'll take it back to double check my fit, and once I'm satisfied with how well it fits, I can move on to the joinery. I found that the best way to get joinery to match up perfectly from one side of a piece to another when cutting sliding dovetails is to gang them together like I've done here. I clamp them both together so that they're in line front to back, and then I know that when I cut that sliding dovetail in, it's going to match perfectly from the left piece to the right. The bottom of the case will simply receive a 1/4 inch dado from one side to the other. Before I cut any of the actual dovetails on any of my pieces, I'll first dial in the fit using a test piece. I'll take a pass on each side and then check the fit in the actual dovetail channel on the piece, making small adjustments to the fence at a time, usually by just giving a little bit of a tap to adjust it. Once I'm happy with the fit, I can move on to the actual piece. Once the dovetails are complete, I'll move over to the table saw and use a dado stack to cut a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch dado on the bottom of either side of the board. This will leave a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch tongue across the bottom of the board that will recess into that dado that I cut earlier in the base of the piece. The drawer dividers will also use sliding dovetails, so I use the same technique as I did before of clamping the top rail onto the front of the bottom so that I can make sure my sliding dovetail is in perfect alignment from top to bottom of the divider. I need to have the dovetails cut in and the case dry assembled so that I can determine the total width of the drawer dividers. With that dimension established, I can cut both of my drawer dividers from a single piece. Because my router table is in the end of my table saw and I needed my table saw to cut the dividers, I wasn't able to keep it set up for the sliding dovetail cut. So I remarked and remeasured everything, setting the depth of my marking gauge off the actual sliding dovetail. I didn't show it here, but I did go through the same process of using a test piece to make a couple cuts, test the fit, adjust the fence, etc. before moving on to the final drawer divider cuts. The end result was a fit that was snug but still easy to install. This next step is actually completely unnecessary, but it does make installing these dividers a little easier. After marking the location of the top rail, I can cut off the excess sliding dovetail from the top of the drawer dividers. Again, this just makes installing the piece a little bit easier when it comes to that. And here you can see without that top sliding dovetail for most of the piece, you don't have to worry about fitting two of them at a time until the final couple inches. The next piece up is the back rail that forms the bottom of the cable management channel. After my initial cut at the table saw, I'll use the shooting board to perfect the fit before finally cutting in some loose tenon joinery. Now I don't have a domino, but I do have this homemade slot mortiser that you'll see me use quite a bit in my videos. It does the same thing. It'll cut a mortise into both sides of the pieces, and then I'll use shop-made tenons that I make up in batches from scrap wood from time to time. With the back rail in place, I can move on to cutting the curve in the front of the case. Now my drawing bow was too short to mark this out, so I used an offcut from when I cut the case bottom down to size to make the curve. The size of the case bottom did make cutting the curve a little bit difficult. So I did use extra support, and I took my time and made the cut on the outside of the line, making sure to leave myself just a little bit extra that I could clean up later. And once the curve was cleaned up on the case bottom, I could use it to trace the same curve onto the top rail. And the last thing to do is to create the fronts for the drawer dividers. Now these are small pieces, so I made sure to use my test piece as a backer board as I push these across. This not only makes it a safer cut, but also prevents tear out. The router table was still set up from last time, so I didn't have to worry about readjusting it or checking the fit. I knew once I made these cuts that they would fit perfectly where I wanted them to go. I left them a little bit oversized. That'll get cleaned up once I do the assembly of the case. And there you have it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll join me on the next one as I move on to connecting the lower case to the top case.